see this recording? Okay, can you?
Yes.
You can see the recording now?
Yes.
All right, fantastic.
Record.
All right. No. So can you hear me, Mariana?
Yes, I can.
And you can, well, I'm going to go for the phone, okay?
You can go for it now.
Okay. So, hi ladies and gentlemen, it's lovely to have you with me tonight, and I hope that you enjoy what I'm going to teach you tonight. So, tonight I'm going to be talking to you about 6 steps to engage your employees all the time. One of the things I find when I'm moving around is that a lot of the time there's a lot of research to talk about, and even in my own experience talking about or experiencing really the issue around disengaged employees. And some of the statistics are quite scary actually around how many employees are engaged and how many employees are not engaged in the work that they're doing or the organizations with whom they're working. So I thought just to start off with, I'll tell you a little bit about me, what I do, who I am. So, who am I? My name is Caryn Walsh. I own a business called Pure Magic International Business Solutions. I work in Australia, I work in Fiji, and I work in Africa. So I do leadership development. So I go into different continents and go into organizations or government departments, and I'm training people to lead companies or lead departments or, just generally get involved in helping people lead better. I do team development. A lot of team developments are helping leaders create really effective, highly performing teams. I do lots of coaching from board level right down to supervisor level, and I enjoy whichever level I work at. I've been a uni lecturer for many years, or was, not so much anymore. I'm a psychologist by training, and I work on 3 continents. So overall, I've been developing leaders for about 25 years and have really loved the work that I do. I believe that, a lot of the time people say to me, oh, Caryn, we've got problems with teams, or our staff are disengaged, or, we've got unhappy, whinging, moaning staff. And I always say at the end of the day that it's a leadership issue. So much of issues in organizations are around leadership issues. So even, for example, when we're talking about why aren't staff engaged and what's the issue with staff not wanting to be here, many of the organizational issues I think that organizations encounter are around leadership issues. And what I mean by that is, for example, rules around, in leadership that might not be particularly clear, job profiles or job descriptions that people aren't sure of, or you might have a leader who isn't particularly consistent in the way that they lead. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, the list goes on and on and on. So I often think that when we're talking about engaged, or for that matter, disengaged staff, we're talking about a leadership issue. And so when we consider what that means, it's around a whole range of different things. And it's around understanding then what it is that you need to do on every level possible to make your people more engaged. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have engaged, involved staff in the work that they're doing, and if they're not helping you as a leader or as an organization ultimately meet your goals, then what's happening is that you're not going to be able to have an organization that meets its goals. So what it means then is, what do we need to do ultimately then? So, and what I also do is I do believe that most of the time, if not all of the time, we will get better outcomes and impacts in organizations and teams overall when people work together. So if people don't work together, if they're not engaged with the work that they're doing, if they're not engaged with each other, ultimately you're not going to be able to achieve the goals, as I said earlier. And it's also another interesting thing I often find is that people don't seem to always understand what's the difference between a highly performing or a low performing team. And there's some significant differences between that. And I think, again, to understand what a highly performing team is and what it looks like in both in terms of tasks and behaviors. And, then what is a low-performing team? Then it means that at the end of the day, you don't know what it is that you're dealing with. So what we know from a lot of the research is that those organizations that have highly performing teams are those organizations that tend to be more productive, more profitable. They tend to make more money. You've got staff that tend to stay. And so when we're talking about engaged staff and understanding what engaged staff means, it is also about then learning how to have highly performing teams that work together. And that's one of the things that I'm just absolutely passionate about. And so a little bit more about me. I'm an author, I'm a columnist. I speak at about 20 conferences around the world each year. There's a lot of you on the line tonight, so welcome. And some of you, the names I know, some of you I know personally, and some of you would have seen me actually talk at some of the conferences that you've been to. So welcome. Okay. Just a couple of pictures of what I do and where I work in my life. So there I am in my beloved Fiji with some of my brothers and sisters there. There I am in the community sector in Australia. I do a lot of traveling. There I am in the sort of map of Africa. And this is my community sector audience. And just to give you a bit of a feel for me. So some staggering statistics. The 2013 Gallup State of the Global Workplace Report that said that only 13% of employees worldwide are engaged. Oh my gosh, 13%. That is really scary. So in other words, what it means is that 87% of employees around the world are disengaged in the work that they do. And so while 70% of business leaders rate retention engagement as important, only 26 rated as urgent, trends have remained unchanged for over a decade. In other words, what we know is that the rate of retention is fairly low and engagement is low, even though 78% of business leaders rate it as something that's critical to the organization. So there's a real mismarriage there between only 13% of employees are engaged and 78% of business says it's important, whereas 26% rate it as urgent. So pretty frightening statistics. So what is it then that the problem, where is the problem? So which is you in the morning? Ladies and gentlemen, do you ever wake up thinking, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. Which is the way up today? Because you've got to go back into the workforce tomorrow or today, and you've got to work with yet more disengaged or unengaged employees, and you think, oh, which is the right way up? Or you think, bad hair day. That's it, having a bad hair day. Can't get my people engaged, can't get them, motivated and enthusiastic. Or you might say, I'm so tired of trying to sort this team out. Or I'm so tired of trying to sort out disengaged staff. That kind of feeling of, oh my gosh, when will this ever end? And what is it that I need to do? And how will I be able to get my staff to be more enthusiastic and more committed and really loving their positions? And sometimes it's just so hard. So what is engagement? I think that's a really important point because, we talk about engagement and we talk about how do you get your staff more engaged. We talk about, how to create the really engaged team member. But what does it actually mean? Is it committed? Is it dedicated? Is it what? So when we look at the definition of engagement, it's actually various things. A complex feeling of loyalty and passion. And so I've obviously taken these particular definitions from different sources, but I think when you're talking about engaged employees, these are people who really want to be in there. They want to be at work. They really enjoy their job. There's obviously some sense of deep satisfaction that they're getting from their role, or if not the job itself, by the way, I think this is an important point. They might not find the job as engaging or as wonderful as they like, but they love the people with whom they work. And over many years of developing leaders, as I said earlier, across different continents, I have come across a few really, really exceptional leaders whose people will follow them to the ends of the earth. And so what that means is that the people may not have the best job in the world. They might not even be paid that well, but they believe in the leader. They believe in the cause or the philosophy behind the organization, what it's trying to achieve, what it's trying to do in the product or services that they sell. And I think that's an important point, because I think there's a myth behind the fact that some of us, or most leaders, believe that people are motivated by money. They're not, ladies and gentlemen. Not every person is motivated by money. So if you are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and some of you may be, some of you may not be. If you're not, please write it down, MASLOW, hierarchy of needs. Go and have a look, because whilst we talk about the basic needs of, shelter, safety, accommodation at the base, and self-actualization at the top of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's a lot of spaces in between. And I think as leaders, or as organizational leaders, it's important that we understand the different drivers that motivate people and the different ways that people get enjoyment and satisfaction from the work that they're doing, without just thinking, oh, all people are motivated by X, Y, Z, or it's only money really that gets people motivated, because it's just not true. And if you do believe that, then I think that's already one lesson for the learning, because you might be trying to motivate people based on different things that you think they're motivated by. Okay, engagement, a feeling that puts an extra zing into the step of employees. Again, that, that passion, that sense of they walk in the door and you can see that there's I want to be here, and, they greet people, and a general air of optimism and a culture of, achievement and support. We want to be here, let's do this together, let's work together, let's help each other, that kind of, can-do attitude. And I must say, very often when I go into organizations initially, I feel a lot of that often, but there's a lot of times when we leave organizations that, we feel that we've put an extra step into the zing of the employees, or an extra zing, into the step of the employees. And it's just really, if I think about what it is, it's about getting the basics right in organizations. So to get staff engaged, or to give them a zing in their step, it's not rocket science. I think it's just about really understanding some of the basics. And it's a feeling that drives innovation, in products and services, and really just drives, the bottom line results. And I think I always say this, I think Richard Branson, I think I've got this a little bit further down in the webinar, Richard Branson does it so beautifully. His real focus totally is on his people. And he always reckons that if you look after the people, everything else looks after itself. And yet, so often it doesn't seem to happen that way in organizations. It's more around, we've got deadlines and we've got things that have to be done. And, when, for example, organizations are downsizing, let's just say that your organization is going through a hard time, just for argument's sake, right? So what organizations tend to do, says the research, is that if they have to tighten their belt, the first thing they'll do is tighten those areas where they should be absolutely focusing their money. So they'll tighten advertising, and these are not in order of priority. Advertising, they'll tighten marketing, and they'll tighten learning and development and training for their people. The three areas that they should be focusing on, and maybe cutting back on other areas, but those three areas they cut back on without realizing that those are the three areas that need to be consistently energized and spent, particularly around people. And engagement is a feeling that ripples across the entire organization, driving success. So when we're talking about engagement, which is not part of this particular webinar, but I'll throw it in. I tend to be a bit cheeky like that. I'll throw in a bit more because I think it's an important point. When we're talking about engaged people, ladies and gentlemen, one of the key things is that organizational culture, or culture to an organization, is what personality is to an individual. So if you have an organization with a culture of achievement of goals and support of each other, in other words, we've got goals, we're getting them done, but we enjoy working together and we look after each other's back, you get that kind of culture of achievement and support, and you have a ripe environment for engaged employees. When you have a culture that is based on power and control, where, there's politics and agendas and backstabbing and, fighting with each other, you will always get a high percentage of disengaged staff. So I guess one of the key things I want you to consider is that if you are in a leadership position, and by the way, organizational cultures are set by the leaders, nobody else. If you are in a leadership role and you're listening to this webinar, I want you to really think about the team culture that you have or the organizational culture that you have. And if it is about power and control and, the hierarchical pecking order, and the boss's favorite, then it's about really thinking about, if I want to change how I get my employees engaged, start with the culture. Because I think it's a really, really important point. It's like if you go into an organization and people are unhappy, it doesn't encourage other people to come, stay, or be happy. In fact, it encourages them to hit the seat button during the lunch break and find a new job. But if they come into an organization where people are accepting, supportive, warm, fun, engaging, people want to stay. And, in all of my years as a leadership consultant and as a psychologist, I've never, ever had a situation where I walk into an organization, people say, oh, thank God we're working in an organization where the culture is just, growing hatred or resentment or anger, and, it's so cool to work here. People don't like working in environments that are hostile and toxic. And so when we're talking about engaging people, that's step number one. Okay, so to engage with people well, you have to lead, and well. And I think that that's a really, really critical point. I can't begin to tell you how many organizations that we've gone in and people have said, the leaders, the chairman, the CEO, the senior director has called us in and said, can you help? We've got a problem in the organization. And the majority of the time, the problem is in the leadership. 99.99% of the time, as I said when I started this webinar, the issue is around the leadership. So if you're going to engage, number one is leaders have to have a clear direction. To get your staff engaged, they need direction. Most people would say, oh, well, I like to have staff who are highly competent and, I can delegate to. Absolutely, that's critical. There's no doubt about that. But even though you might have highly competent and able staff, they still need to know where you want to go. They've got to have direction. And so very often when we go into organizations and things don't seem well, and I'll say, well, what's the vision? Huh? Okay, so what's the goals? Oh, I don't know. So I'll give you an example. I was working in a company the other day, 2 weeks ago, and I was working with, there were about 6 senior leaders in the room, 6 senior leaders, and I said, so can you tell me what the vision of this large department is, because it was a large department. And they said, well, stumble. And I said, so what is the vision of the department? They didn't have a vision. They didn't really know what their goals were, and they didn't really know where they were trying to take their people. Interestingly enough, in the last 6 months, they've lost over 70% of their people because they don't know where they're going. And if they don't know where they're going, how will the people down the line who are following them know where they're going? So have a clear direction. Know your people and greet them. Now, you might think this is a really cheeky sentence, and I really don't mean it to be, but when I'm talking about greeting your people, I mean greet them. It sounds such a silly, basic thing of leadership, but I can't tell you how many times I witness leaders not saying hello to their people, not acknowledging their people, not, showing interest in their people. Greet them with a smile. So every time you walk in the door, every time you see one of them, hi Joe, how you going? Or hi Samantha, how you going? Smile. It's a little thing that goes so far. An example was, well, I'll tell you one. I was coaching a CEO a couple of months ago, and he and I were walking from the cafeteria, the canteen area, back to his office. And on the way back to his office, we were walking, and coming towards us were 2 lovely young ladies. And as they walked towards me, I said, oh, hi, how are you? And they smiled, fine, thanks, hi, and off they went. And the CEO to whom I was talking didn't greet them. So when we got back to his office, because he's paying me to coach him, I say to him, let's call him John for argument's sake, John, why didn't you greet those 2 people? And he said to me, well, which 2 people? I said, we just walked past 2 lovely young ladies who obviously are your people. And you know his answer was to me, he said, oh, I didn't see them. And I say, well, if you don't see them, how do you lead them? And if you can't lead them, how do you expect them to get engaged? So I want to hone in on the basics, ladies and gentlemen. Greet your people warmly, receptively, with a smile on your face. Make them feel as if they are important in your world. Make them feel as if, you know, they are people about whom you care. Make them feel as if they're there because you want them to be there. And one of the key things, for example, I'm thinking about another organization, and I say, so tell me a little bit about your leader. Or no, well, he's a nice guy or she's a nice lady. Yep, okay, so, well, one of the problems we have, Caryn, is that we don't know what they're going to be like. Well, what does that mean? Well, one moment they greet us, the next moment they don't. Some days they're moody, some days they're not. So here's two things. Greet your people and be consistent in how you are. Pay them properly, ladies and gentlemen. Don't be frugal in how you're paying your people. Pay them realistically. But by the same token, whilst you pay them properly, you know, make your expectations as to what you want from them in terms of work outcomes very clear, and make sure that you drive and expect high performance from them. Because one of the key things is that people feel undervalued and they feel ignored, if you like, if they're not paid properly. And it's one thing to pay somebody properly, but it's also to make sure that you get what you're paying for. And I think that's a very important point. Be a people person. You know, be a people person. I do appreciate that some of us are introverts and some of us are more comfortable, you know, playing on technology than leading people or working with people. But at the end of the day, every organization, even if it's a one-man band, you've still got to come into contact with people at times. So I always say to people who find managing people or working with people or living with people or leading people difficult, get your head around how to lead people, because the way to lead them is all of the things I've just described, but also by leading them well, you engage them. You could have examples where people, for example, don't really like the organization that much or don't like the big CEO that much, but they love their team member or they love their team leader or they love their supervisor, and they'll go to the ends of the earth for that person. And what's that about? That's about the technical competence of the leader and the relationship they have with them. You know, one of the things I think a lot of the time when we work with organizations is that there's always a focus on the tasks. You know, we've got to finish this, we've got to have that goal done, this outcome achieved, and that's absolutely important. But the other equally as important part of being a leader and engaging your staff is to have great relationships with them. You know, tasks and relationships are equally important if you are going to engage your staff. And it's the basic stuff like always praise, show interest, ask them how they are, pay them properly, you know, those kind of things that I think are very, very important. I love Richard Branson. I think he's fabulous in some of the work he says. But he was asked, so well, how do you look after your customers? And his response was, I don't look after my customers. I look after my people and they look after the customers. And I think that's probably the most important point of what I'm saying. Look after your people and your customers will be looked after. But I guess the most important question that I want you to ask yourself right now is this. Do you? Do you look after your people well enough that they will look after your customers? Do you treat your people as if they are the most important thing in your life every work day? Do you serve them? There's a particular style of leadership called servant leadership. I talk a lot about servant leadership. And what I think you would find really helpful is to go onto the internet and have a look at what servant leadership is. In a nutshell, your role as a servant leader is to make sure that you do everything you can to serve your people well every day, following 10 guiding principles. So when we talk about 6 ways to engage your people, you know, there's so many ways, as I think I've already alluded to. But in my experience and having done this work for so many different organizations in the corporate sector, in the community, education, government, so many sectors, treat them well. Number 1 is treat them well. Show respect and fairness at all times. And I mean, you know, this is the thing. I want you to, in fact, what I think would be really interesting if you could do is if you grab a pen and a piece of paper, and what I want you to do is, because I can't see you, and and you're not going to have to share this with everybody or anybody really. As we go through these 6, I want you to score yourself and how you do each of these 6 out of 10. So, for example, treat them well. 10 means you do that very, very well, and 1 means, well, you don't do it well at all. And 5 or 4 might mean a bit inconsistent. So how well do you treat your people? Are you respectful? Do you show them respect? Do you greet them? Do you say the basic please and thank yous? Are you calm? Are you polite? Do you tend to shout? Do you get frustrated? Score yourself. Treat your people well. I think this is a really interesting one. Show an interest in them as people. So ask them about their interests. Ask them about their families, their successes, their challenges. Show an interest in your people. They're working for you. Your business depends on them. And at the end of the day, you know, I was speaking at this conference in Fiji. It was the Human Institute of Fiji conference. And the topic I was talking about was the people in the room were all HR people, HR managers, directors, leaders from a whole range of different companies in Fiji. And one of the things I was talking about was teaching them how they as HR practitioners should and need to claim their seat at the table of organizational greatness. And, you know, if you're thinking about HR or people and culture, as they're often called, what is the basis of people and culture? What is the basis of organizations? What is it that organizations comprise? Well, it's people. You know, it's people. At the end of the day, if you don't have people, you really don't have an organization. And even, for example, an online thing where you're sending out dresses online or shoes, you still have people to pack those things. So the day of, you know, it's not my business what's going on in their life and, you know, I don't really want to get involved. Those days are over, ladies and gentlemen. Stop and say, how are you, Johnny? And tell me a little bit about your family. Even, for example, if you know one of them's going through a hard time, you don't have to say anything else further than saying, hey, you know, John, I know you're going through a hard time, and I just want you to know that if you need to discuss anything, I'm always here. Those little things, or, you know, how's little Johnny? I believe he scored a goal and he won a cup at the latest soccer tournament. When you engage with your people on a personal level, they relate to you on a personal level. And I think it's such a simple thing, and yet so many leaders just don't seem to do it or do it well. Create opportunities for their growth and development within the organization and outside of it. So, for example, I was speaking at another conference about a topic called, the heading of my topic was called, Why Generation Y Are Like Diamonds to Your Business. And I did a lot of research. I always do research before I speak at conferences, but the research I had done behind this topic was I wanted to be sure of the facts that I had before I actually explained why I believe that Generation Y are like diamonds to modern day businesses. So if I take a step back, there's a lot of antipathy and irritation and conflict in organizations between Generation Y, you know, Generation X and the baby boomers. The baby boomers, who are people who are older and obviously more experienced and have a better understanding of the business overall, well, they would or should because they're older, but there's often a lot of confusion and conflict between them and the Generation Y. Generation Y is basically 19 to 31 years. And so, you know, the Generation Y feel as if they are ignored by older people in the organization, discounted, not valued, not asked for their opinion, you know, treated like they're juveniles. And whereas the baby boomers feel that the Generation Y people are arrogant, rude, short, you know, opinionated, etc. So what you've got is that you've got a difference of generation, but they can be very successfully married if it's done well. And one of the key things that came out of the research that I actually did, which I thought was really quite interesting, was that Generation Y will stay with an organization if they feel that their career, listen to this, their career and their learning and development opportunities are being looked after. And the other equally staggering thing that I had no idea about was that Generation Y are the most intelligent, of all the generations and educated of all the generations. That was a bit scary, but there you go. And the other thing is that Generation Y are the least motivated overall by money than any other generation. They want to know what career prospects they've got. They want to know that you're looking after their growth. They're wanting to know how they're going to get to the top of the pile and what their organization is doing about it. So it was a really interesting thing for me to realize that then, in order to keep Generation Y, because they are the future, it's critical that modern-day business leaders create opportunities for their growth and development. So something to think about if you don't do that already. I talked just now about servant leadership. So regularly assess how you can help them grow as people and as employees. So when we talk about servant leadership, it's a newest style of leadership, but instead of making them come up the career pathway, which I think is important anyway, but I guess what I'm saying with this particular point is to show an active interest in their growth with each of them if you can. Now, obviously, if you've got 600 people, it's a bit difficult, but that comes in back to in point number 2, which is to show an interest in them as people. But essentially, it's about, strong business succession, employee development, paying them properly, treating them well, making them feel as if they're a valuable asset to the business. Because here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, your people are not important to your business. Your people are the most important thing to your business. And I think once we understand that, when I think about many organizations that we go into, we could, for example, go into, let's say we work with 2 banks, let's just say. And we have to develop, we've been asked to develop teams in both banks. Now, here's the thing, and leaders, here's the thing. Both banks offer the same services. They offer, mortgages, and they offer loans, and they offer, interest-free accounts, and they offer all the things that banks offer, right? So Bank A decides that they want to do a lot of training and development. They want to grow their people. They want to put in business succession planning. They want to have committees where people can thrive. They want to have lunches with the CEO where people can go and the CEO walks around the organization. So an organization is basically a learning organization, right? But essentially they've got the same services that Bank B has. And Bank B, for example, might be a bank, let's just say, that thinks here that team development and leadership development, yeah, it's important, but, we'll get to it at the end of the year or next year. What we need to focus on now is selling more loans and, getting more people to come and use our services. So what you've got is that you've got 2 banks with exactly the same product range, but one bank focuses on people and the other bank focuses on sales. And at the end of the day, the only difference that you have really is the people. So the Bank A is by far and above going to thrive more so than Bank B because they're growing their greatest asset, which is people. And the more they grow their people, develop their people, the culture improves. You've got one of achievement and support and teamwork and exemplary performance, the more profitable and successful that organization is going to be. And I've seen this over the 25 years I've been doing this work. I see this time and time and time again. And I think this is something that I'll, lead by example, encourage them, praise them when they do things well. I don't see enough praise in organizations. When we talk about praise, most people think, well, I had a CEO the other day saying, well, Caryn, I give them a bonus. That's a praise. And I guess in some way, ladies and gentlemen, it is a praise. But, let's get back to the human fundamentals. How about going over to their desk and saying, I want you to know that I really think you did a fantastic job the other day. What about calling them into your office and saying, I want you to know how absolutely grateful I am for you for doing da-da-da-da. So it's about how we relate and not to do it only behind closed doors. Praise them, validate them in front of others. Let me tell you something, that if you praise your people or one person in front of the whole department, that's worth more to them than maybe $10,000 bonus at the end of the year. And again, coming back to what I said when I started Maslow's hierarchy of needs, People are motivated by different things, and those things include not only money, it could be recognition, it could be praise, it could be feeling as if they're contributing to something meaningful, it could be feeling as if they're achieving something, it could be feeling as if there's a sense of belonging as being part of a team or an organization. I think Virgin does that really well. I think Branson's got the money on the honey there, because he has been able to create a family, a Virgin family, and he treats his people as a family. And I think if you're ever interested, go and have a look at what he offers employees and what they're doing, rewards and recognitions, et cetera, but it's his personal way, I think, that really helps them. And the other thing, I think this is a really important point in engagement, is to move people around into different positions, projects, to keep them stimulated and energized. In all the years that we've been working in this particular field, I say these 6 things would be the things that I think are the most critical of all to keep your staff engaged. What I often find is, if, Bob's been in this position for 8 years, Bob might like the position, and there's some people, I think it's important to say, some people that like a particular position and they don't want to change, and they're happy with that, and that needs to be respected. But if you're wanting to have a multi-tasked organization where you can move people around and use different skills and collective talent throughout your organization, then, and also to grow them and keep them, kind of in the game, and to keep them interested and energized, and to remove the boredom factor and the complacent apathy, then move them around, get them onto different committees, projects, doing different things. Because we all want to feel as if we contribute. We all want to feel as if we're doing things that are different, and it keeps us energized and going. Now, I thought I would throw this up because I think this has to be, oh dear, probably the most important of all the leadership things that I teach wherever I go. I'm thinking about a leader I was working with overseas, and he says, he wants his staff to be energized and competent and very much in the customer's face. He wants them to be visible. He wants them to be engaging with the customer. He wants them to greet them and to be, the kind of go-to people. And what was interesting in that, ladies and gentlemen, is whilst he wanted his people to do that, he didn't do that. He never came out of his office. He never socialized with his people. He was really, really, as an R-A-R-E-L-Y, rarely seen out and about. And so if you want, as a leader, if you want to engage your team or get them engaged, then you've got to learn to model a behavior that you want. Excuse me. So moving forward, how we can help. We run leadership and specific team development programs. We run 24 one-day management and staff programs. We do coaching and leadership retreats. We actually do more leadership retreats now than we ever have before, which is interesting. We would love you to go to our website, which is www.puremagicbusiness.com.au. We offer various discounts. We offer specials. We do a range of different things. As I say, we work in Africa, Fiji, and in Australia. If you book any one program with us before April ends, you get a 5% discount to a 10. And if you want to do any of the longer programs, we will have to discuss a discount for you. But if you are interested, and we hope you are, please mention code 2360 when you book for your discount. What I would like to know is, are there any questions that you have, ladies and gentlemen? Because if you do, I'm really, really happy to answer any questions that you're wanting to throw my way. Okay, so I have one here. Interesting question. Thanks, Dean. The question is, of all the leadership skills that you teach or develop, which would you say are the most critical? That's such a good question. I think there's a couple, Dean. One of them would definitely be the ability to be emotionally intelligent. Absolutely would be up there. And what I mean by that is leaders who are able to manage their emotions well, their frustrations, their anger, they're calm, even though things might not be going their way or their teams let them down. They're always polite. They don't lose their temper. They don't get angry. They just always manage to be very calm and collective. I think that is a key critical thing in modern day organizations. And when I look at some of the leaders in the world today, I think that's one of the key skills that's missing. So if you think about two of the world leaders in the last 2 weeks that have almost, the whole world's been waiting to see if there's going to be any further action towards a world war. I think both leaders don't possess a high level of emotional intelligence. And I think if in all of the skills that international leaders have, if they don't have that, I think that particular skill is the one that would be the most prone to sending us into a state of international warfare, lack of emotional intelligence. I think the other one is the ability to communicate well. So what do I mean by that? The ability to say what you mean and mean what you say with clarity. And when I'm saying mean what you say and say what you mean, I mean to be, with clarity, but with no hidden agenda behind the message. This is what it is, and I'm not saying X but meaning Y. So transparency really is what I'm saying. Communicate well and transparency. I think those particular things are critically important, and I'm not even going to say things like honesty, integrity, and trust, because for me those are just a foregone conclusion. If you don't have those in your leadership, well, then you don't have a lot as a leader should have in leading. Just want to, there's another question that's come through from Sarah around engaging your team members if you are a team member. I think that's a really important point. One of the key things around engaging your team members is often how you as an individual are engaged in the team yourself. So a couple of different teams, if you think about often technical jobs like technology teams, computer teams, computer departments, technological departments, they're often very competently and technical people working on their own, on machines, hardware, software, et cetera. And I think those teams can sometimes be harder to bring together collaboratively, but not always. And often those particular careers attract more introverted people, technologically gifted but introverted people, whereas, for example, a sales or a marketing team tend to attract more gregarious, outgoing people who, whilst they're competitive, tend to be more collaborative and, come on, let's get the goals kicked and let's get organized. So what I think I'm trying to say is that different teams have different feels or cultures about them, and some teams are difficult or easier to engage in terms of employees than others. So one of the key things I think in working in teams is that let's say you've got 6 people in a team, and you've got one person who consistently sulks or disengages or doesn't get involved or is rude, and the other sort of 5 people are completely confused what to do, don't know what to do anymore. We're trying to engage this person, but they won't engage. I think this is a really, really critical point that I want to make. It's not a team issue, ladies and gentlemen. It's a leadership issue. So what I mean by that is that if you've got one person who's not playing according to the rules, it's because they're allowed not to play. And if you've got one child in a family like that, for example, in a family, i.e. a team, then you're going to have ultimately a team or a family that doesn't play happily because you've got one person who makes everybody else's life a misery. That's where rules and codes of conduct come in. But it's all very well to have a code of conduct, but if it's not used or, it's just stuck on a wall behind a drawer, well, that's pointless. So I always say code of conduct needs to be designed by the team, for the team. We all need to assess our own performance and the performance of our teams according to that particular code of conduct. And also, I think the important thing is that in the performance appraisals every year, we assess ourselves and each other according to that, that code of conduct. The other thing on a code of conduct, just to throw in a little extra, is I often find in organizations that the organizational code of conduct is so far removed from the team that if I say to them, well, what's the code of conduct in the organization, they can't tell me because it's 6 steps up. So I always say, and often encourage teams to come up with their own code of conduct, which is in line with the organizational code of conduct, but their own little team code of conduct is what they use to monitor and guide behavior. And by monitoring and guiding good behavior, ladies and gentlemen, you increase employee engagement. So that was a good question, Dean. I think that was really, really valuable. So I'm just being asked another question here about what I've just said around teams and engagement. One of the things I think teams can do is if you've got one person who isn't engaging but the others are, first and foremost, I've just explained, something needs to be done from a leadership perspective because it's a leadership issue. However, I also think that the team has a responsibility to do something about that based on our code of conduct, which I've just explained. And what I think the team has a responsibility for is to approach the person collectively as a team, not one person on their own, but to collectively approach that person as a team and say, look, we really are unsure what's going on here, but what we want you to know is that, we enjoy working with you, or we have enjoyed working with you in the past, or whatever it might be, but the way that your behavior is at the moment is actually impacting all of us significantly. It's affecting the way that we feel when we come to work. It's affecting the way that we work. It's affecting the morale. So we collectively care enough about this issue to come and talk to you about it, and we're trying to work out what we're going to do moving forward. So I think that's an example of how the team can engage or increase the employee engagement of another team member. And I think throughout the webinar, I've tried to address, and hopefully done well, how leaders can increase the engagement of their staff using a minimum of 6 different strategies and techniques. So we run these webinars every month, ladies and gentlemen. We run a women's program as well, so we do an Empowering Women to Thrive. So generally on these nights, which is normally a Wednesday or Thursday night, we run the Empowering Women webinar first, and then we run the Pure Magic Leadership and Team Development webinar second, which is this one. But every month that we run them, there's different topics and they're different sessions and they're different issues that we try to share with our members of our distribution lists and clients who come on. Please feel very free to give me a call or to email me with any question that you have. If you go onto the Pure Magic Business website, you can download a free copy of a leadership book that I wrote. It's an e-book. And I look really forward to hearing from any of you or any time. If you would like us to work with you, we would be absolutely privileged to do so. But other than that, please feel free to contact me at any time at info@puremagicbusiness.com.au. And I wish you the very, very best, and I hope all is well in your lives. So have a lovely evening and take care. And thank you for joining me. Bye.